करा। चलिए आपको दिखाते सीधे लाइव तस्वीर।
Whereas that's not the only thing it's communicating. I mean, a channel can have 5% share, but who's to say which 5% of people are watching that channel? And what kind of TG is it bringing to the advertisers? So the slicing of the data and the kind of relativity that the advertiser needs also needs to be deep dived into, because it's a small part of the portion. Perhaps a lot of these companies are not doing that. I think that's my grouse.
That, that, uh, that's a brilliant take, Karthik. That, so if you could quickly react to what he's saying. While as we just established that GECs and news are completely different, news also, I think the impact of news is, could have been a far greater parameter to decide the efficacy of a news channel. So Karthik is saying that why so much of emphasis only on numbers? Why do you buy both GEC and news under the same parameter?
Okay, now I think we're getting into the deep end of things. Things will get a little bit more hairy and interesting. Great. I think you raised a brilliant point. Look, as media planning has become more of a science, there is a reliance on numbers, reach, frequency, all that jazz. And people will look at numbers, and especially since they're professional managers who also have to sort of cover their backside, so to speak, they will be using numbers to actually come out with plans to justify, basically science to justify their plans. So that said, if I have to look, we're talking genres, if we have to look at GEC, sports, and all the other genres and then come to news, there are two ways in which we media agencies buy or do our deals. One is linked to ratings, and one is just a rate for 10 seconds that you guys are selling. I would say that actually the reality is that news, at least 50 to 60% of it, if not more, is being sold on a rate. It is not only rating. Rating is looked at, but as we stand right now, people are looking at both. Second thing is that when you come to owner-driven organizations, you'll find the owner-driven organization who doesn't have to worry about covering his backside. They'll take punts and calls very well by say, qualitatively, I believe this channel is better or with whatever, and they have a judgment. It's not a gut call only, it's a judgment. And they are willing to sort of go beyond numbers to actually take a call. So I wouldn't say it's a complete, we aren't living in a completely sort of anally number-driven land. I think it's somewhere in the middle. It is much better than it is for a whole number of genres. You need to be thankful for that. Can it become better? I think the conversations can become better. But that's where it is. I think the state of the nation right now is, it's not a completely hopeless that people are not only relying on numbers. I think another follow-up question, I think after we go around is let's get into the numbers themselves. I'd love to get into the numbers because I think with the vagaries, with what we have from rating system, and BARC chairman is sitting here, I lead the TechCom of BARC, so we have some idea about how the BARC ratings and even for news actually happen. I think we are trying to take too much out of those numbers. Too much. And I think that's a follow-up question. But right now, to answer your question, Karthikeya, or your observation, it's not so hopeless. I think people are taking calls. It's about 50-50.
Prashant, you would like to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean,
Karthik's
I agree with every point. So let's face this, I mean, every brand does not have a potential 500 million customers to reach. And that's a fact. There are large FMCG companies where, I mean, they have a larger base to attend to, in retaining customers as well as recruiting new. But there are many categories within that same category or multiple categories where they are probably looking for 1 lakh potential customers, and as low as that. We as a genre has a much larger play on the upper funnel. We definitely have very engaging reach, not just reach on those. So there are clear opportunities, right? Even if you want to read the numbers in a certain form. The question is, how are we narrating that story, right? How are we exchanging those conversations? Every table is a negotiation table, and if it just only restrict to a currency of rate per 10 seconds, then we both are responsible, which is a buyer or a seller. So let us understand that. And today I would like to add one more point, which I think is experienced with everybody. After 2.5 years of COVID, we are in a situation, this industry, with almost 35% of the people are probably new. Now it's a challenge, but I feel it's an opportunity. We got to educate them, right? I mean, we spend in our own organization, spending enough more time. Of course, today also there are challenges, people coming to office. But at the same time, our single most, focus is to continue train our people, right? So that's an opportunity for us to relate that. I mean, there are new people, there are people in new roles. In the client side, there are new people, right? So if you're able to narrate the solution in appropriate form, I think we can definitely make it much more faster, right? I mean, the result is all what we know, but if you want to look at the pace, I think that we can make a big change if you're able to attend to that as well. That's it.
If I just paraphrase what Vikram and Prashant said, that essentially there are, I mean, the third one you haven't touched upon, there are 3 parameters or 3 aspects based on which you take your decision. One, of course, number. The second is qualitative, the perception, which is more in case of an English news genre, less in case of a Hindi or regional. And the third is how good is the salesman, as you said, that how good he puts it across the table and makes his point beyond numbers. And we've seen our lives that, yes, sometimes not only numbers, you look at other parameters also. Shashi, since you also are a chairman of BARC, I think one of the very critical aspects of news genre is the impact. The other genre can be sold on these 3 aspects, but impact. Is there any way you see in foreseeable future, because news is all about impact, can we incorporate that part, maybe a little bit subjectively or maybe with any kind of reference number?
To tell you honestly, I haven't thought about it, but it's an interesting point. So don't want to bat without thinking, but it's an interesting point you make. Let me, yeah.
Right, okay, thanks. So from this advertising thing, let's move to the other aspect of our business, which we are completely deprived of, which is subscription revenue. Again, you guys are brand champions. You created brands, you created organizations, you helped organizations overcome challenges and came out victorious. How do we get these Indian consumers to pay for consumption of news? You see, our newspapers are highly subsidized. I think not even 20% or 10% of variable manufacturing cost a newspaper owner would have recovered. And most of the television news channels are free to air. I think while the industry operates at about, in India, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about close to 55 to 60% of subscription revenue, whereas the news genre operates at some 6 to 8% subscription revenue. That too also, most of them would be bundled. On its own might not have been sold. We tried our bit, in fact, you know about that, OTT, News 9 Plus, we've launched, and we aspire to make it completely subscription driven and ad free. How do you have, as brand champions, something to guide us on that? How do we go about? It may not be overnight, but how do we go about getting these Indian consumers to pay for consumption of news? Starting with you, Vikram.
Differentiated and compelling content. That's 2 things. So according to me, like live sport, cricket, it is unique, it is highly differentiated. If one platform has it and you can't see it somewhere else, that's the only place that people will come and they'll pay because it's compelling content. GEC, they have the top shows. Currently, there's a show called Anupama. It's doing amazingly well. At that point in time, and you can only see it on Star Plus. So people will pay to get there. The thing with news and your challenge with news is, currently, I'm a reasonably avid news surfer. So I might see between 9 and 10, 3 channels. And I find there is a largely the same kind of news delivered maybe a little differently across those. So somewhere along the line, and if you say there are 600 channels, think about the consumer. Why, if they're not getting highly differentiated content, and if it is not that compelling, then why should they pay?
Right. Prashant, I think here, as we discussed some time back, there's a problem that we got to live on things that had happened. We can't create incidences. Therefore, the challenge of differentiation always remains for us, unlike, as I said, GC or sports. Anything that you would like to add to what Vikram has said?
Yeah, I think, see, there is news, and then there is the business of news, right? And this topic falls in the latter part. Now, I know there are limitations, I mean, there are regulations, there are tri-bodies, etc., from a subscription perspective and all. But I think if we are able to think slightly more sharper, which is what are some of the strong assets that we have, like the prime time viewing is a strong asset. Now, we should also understand that these are all habits that we've infused into the system, and some of it are legacy issues. Now, we want to create a change in the habit, right? Now, how do we create change in the habit? I mean, we may have to start with probably prime time subscription. I don't know, I'm just putting a thought, right? And I'm sure everybody has their own preferences of viewing prime time and news, right? But that's left to the choice of the consumer, which could be influenced by the channels. But that's how we start thinking on, right? Today is a world where many of our, different categories are giving opportunities to look at the models different, right? Commerce is a model that is coming in, right? Every one of us has got multiple reach. Is there a thought on how we look at, differentiated categories and look at how we can package some of them? I don't know. Again, it's a thought for us to think. It's also a time where we have multiple digital, assets that we ourselves have created. Now, is there a combo model there? It's again an opportunity to think in. So to me, if we all sit collectively together, we may have 100 such ideas, right? So if we can indulge in that, select some of them, create solutions to induce change in habits of consuming, right? And then create differentiation, which is a daily game for us. I'm sure we'll have solutions to that. Now, whether you want to hit the ball out of the park on day one, or whether you want to, do it in a in a progressive manner, I think that is left to, again, the business of news, which each one of you are focusing. That's my idea.
Right. Shashi, you want to add to that?
I don't agree with the fundamental premise that, it's difficult to create differentiation in news. I mean, people sitting here, anchor celebrities themselves.
It's difficult. I did not say impossible.
Yeah, and I give you a small example.
And put it in perspective, more difficult than GEC.
Maybe. That always, my company is more difficult to run than Prashant's. He'll say, no, I'm bigger. Like we're having this conversation at breakfast. He says, I'm bigger. Therefore, it's more difficult to maintain. So I empathize. Look at beyond. I mean, not be appropriate to give an example here. No ratings, nothing. Today our clients say, listen, let's get on to it. Whatever they did, there's a content, anchor, everything put together. So I think it's principles of marketing. If you apply all those principles for anything in life, we do it all the time for our clients, we'll apply here also. So,
I talked about converting that into subscription revenue.
Subscription
revenue. I don't think
subscription revenue, I think before you go to the consumer, you have to first convince the government with your power if you can't convince them. So if you get them to make it easy for you to get subscription, then half the battle will be won, sir. Am I right in what I'm saying? Right. So,
So I'm sure that's written in the textbook as well. Karthik, we need to wind up. So before we come to the individual comment about future of news, anything that you would like to add to this discussion?
I think the problem here is not industry specific. It's a global problem. When we look at subscription in news, I think we're getting confused between linearity of content and subscription on the digital and other premises. I speak of it on purpose because globally, if you look at it, subscription in the new manifestation is still a challenge. Whether it's The Economist or the Wall Street Journal globally, even they're finding it difficult to get subscription. See, I think we are approaching it in an incorrect manner. The way we have to look at consumption going forward is that only way subscription will be possible is if consumers think the content is worthy of paying for it. And that will only happen if there's commonality when you're consuming content. So, in other words, let me put it in an example. I think the future of news for subscription lies in communities. A common platform where people come together to use content, consume it, and will be able to actually use it to their advantage. They'll pay for it. Until unless it's generic in nature, they will not pay for it. And that's a problem we have to deal with. That's a problem because it's the same for us as it is for the rest of the world. I think the biggest challenge that lies there, and if I can come back to our earlier panel, because I wanted to make a point on that, is that which numbers do we go by? I mean, numbers, when we speak of, we have two sets of numbers. We have numbers that we come through the television rating mechanism, and then we have another set of numbers that comes through digital media. And not to say that those numbers are not right, or those algorithms are not right. Frankly, they are far more in depth and far more in detail. So when we put out a video on a channel and we say that according to the television metric, it has reached so many million people. At the same time, when you put out the same content on digital media and we say it has reached to far more people than what the metric says, I think that is a challenge. So which numbers to follow? That is also a constant process. So I definitely ask,
I'll just briefly answer to that. Try and
I want Shashi to answer that. Sir.
One sec. I'll just give it to Shashi, but I just want to add something what you said, and the question becomes complete then. I think if you talk about which number, while we measure broadcast audience number, that is broadcast. When you measure digital, that is digital. And I still feel the digital audience in India is still evolving. It's trailing a little bit behind broadcast. Having said that, I can tell you that couple of markets in India, like let's say Bangalore, Karnataka, let's say Maharashtra, there is a correlation between, let's say, a YouTube concurrent viewership and television rating, which is there in Hindi too. But some markets it's not there. But then why we can't strictly look at that from the YouTube concurrent viewership is that you can influence that by boosting.
But on YouTube might not be the only parameter, no? There are multiple parameters.
That's right.
So Hindi heartland might have more impressions on Facebook, while the urban cities might have it on Twitter and Instagram.
So Shashi, are we heading towards that?
I'm mindful that PK has a flight to catch, and this answer could take very long. So I thought, are we doing a session on
Yes. On the measurement
may I
rating
answer that?
systems?
Because I'm mindful my friend shouldn't miss his flight.
Right.
So,
Okay, finally, I think we'll ask for each one of you to comment briefly on how do you see the future of television news. And I have a proposition. I think the panacea for television news is, which is again very controversial, very radical, the total revenue of news industry is about 5,000 crore. So if I could give away 5,000 crore to all the news organizations, say that this is the revenue that you earned last year, here is revenue for 1 year, and I'm giving you 1 year time to turn yourself completely.